Yeah, well, I think probably evaluating tonight, and coming down off the excitement of a very, very good win. At this stage of the season, 6 games remaining, 5 now. Of course, it's absolutely vital that not only we finish the season off well with some momentum, if we can, but probably the most important thing is to keep adding points and to keep that fight going, to get ourselves above that line, because it is a fight. There are some very good teams in the mix, and it could well go down to the wire. So the performance, especially in the second period, of course I have to highlight Hanny's sensational display against what I thought was a pretty decent man marking job by Acosta, and he still scores a hat-trick. I mean, I think it just underlines the sheer quality of the individual, and should really shine an even bigger spotlight on what he's trying to achieve this year.
Gary, how does winning 3 straight, knowing what that means for you guys, given where you guys have come from, but also what that means to you guys in the standings, balancing that with what spots 3 through 9 look like? How do you balance it?
Well, look, before we played Dallas here, make no mistake, that game was of huge importance to get ourselves back on track. We performed at a very high level. 4 goals gives a group huge confidence. To switch the group around and to get such a good result in Vancouver, of course, reinforces some of the high caliber work that's going on. I think we conceded 1 goal in 3 games now. What is that? 11 goals. Those stats are very, very good from a group that were creating chances but probably not making the most of them. We're now seeing a far more ruthless edge in front of goal. And I think, in terms of competition, I think we have to expect that, we're running into teams now, Colorado, Dallas, Vancouver, all in the mix. It'll be no different at the weekend against Austin. The games are going to be tight, they're going to be tense, and having someone in the sort of form that Hanny's in, and obviously being more confident in their final third, in the attacking third, of course, bodes well as we go into these final 5 games.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about Acosta and kind of that man marking system. It felt like at times he was almost dropping into their back line, and their fullbacks, it felt like getting so high it caused you guys some problems in the first half. Hani, after the game, said that he had a lot of trouble with it and felt like he figured it out at halftime. What adjustments, or what did you see at halftime, and why do you think that the surge kind of worked?
For sure. There were a couple of other things that went on in that midfield. They locked on to our midfield players. It was almost a man-for-man scenario in the central part of the field. Very reminiscent of the early Atlanta days and San Jose. Those guys can get dragged around, and the important factor at half-time was, to find some better quality out of the group, to move the ball more efficiently, and to find those connections, better supporting angles, and to move it a little bit quicker. And of course, confidence grows when it's successful, and we were successful early on in the second half. It can then be a little bit more demoralising for the opposing team, and of course, to add into that, the press and the energy from the group, the intensity to try and win it back, went up a gear, which was important. They had far too much time to control the game, to pick their spot, and to put us under pressure. And the goals, make a massive difference, of course, when there are a couple more things that are going right for you. You want that underlined.
We'll go to the Zoom with Tim Sullivan.
Gary, you mentioned to Tony and Jamie after the game that you feel like Hani's in a good position for the MVP race as Austin comes to town. How excited are you to see kind of that head-to-head battle, and what are you expecting to see from not just Austin, but especially from Sebastian Trevisi?
Well, I could say I'm really not that interested in seeing the pair of them on the field. I'm most interested in Hanny, of course. What I do understand is that Driussi is a fantastic player. He's hugely influential for Austin. And he himself is in, of course, a very, very good position, and he's fighting hard, I'm sure, for the MVP title. What I expect, though, is to run into a group that are in a very, very confident mood. They themselves have some terrific momentum. Wonderful result against LAFC about a week ago. And I'm sure they themselves feel as though they could possibly chase that Western Conference title down, given the result in Houston tonight. I've not seen, I think the Austin game has maybe been delayed, weather delay or whatever, but they've obviously kicked off late. But the team that's coming into town are one of the informed teams. Well, in the last 3 games, I'd have to say we're not far away from that ourselves. It's a very small sample size. They've obviously achieved that to a far greater degree across the course of the season. But it will be a huge test. It will be a great test. And I would think all of the guys are looking forward to it after the result tonight.
Gary, what do you make of Schaffelberg's first few games here? What did you think you were getting from him when he came in on loan? And how would you kind of evaluate his play so far?
Well, I think the first thing is Jacob's not played an awful lot of football up in Toronto, and he had to deal with a 10-day or so window where he couldn't work with Toronto. We were waiting on paperwork. So, as you can see, we're working him towards that full fitness. What I expected as a player, I think we've got very dynamic, very predominantly left-footed, which balances our group out. Extremely energetic and team-oriented. And if you look at the way that he's affected our group, what he's given our group, the different dimension that he's offered for our team, and of course, the end product, 2 goals and a penalty earned in the 3 games that he's been involved in, and a 20-minute cameo in Vancouver, and earns a penalty towards the end, and 2 goals in the only 2 games that he started. So I'm not sure I could have expected too much more of a return than we've got right now. Listen, I'm delighted that he's here. I've said that before. And my hope is that he can keep reinforcing those performances.
Gary, arguably, Randall Garrett's been playing the best soccer that we've seen play in Nashville. It wasn't because of Proctor being where he is. We might have been talking about Randall pretty much after every game. What has happened in terms of the practical going for him to be so important nowadays, especially in the last 3 quarters of the season?
Well, I mean, Randall's always been important. You know that. When we played with the back 3 for a long time last year, he was influential in that, what we would class as that attacking trio. Did a fantastic 2-way job, and has certainly the engine and the energy and the tenacity to perform for the team, and what I would class as creatively for himself to try and score, or for others. I think he's inspired to try and get close to the Costa Rican national group towards the World Cup. Who wouldn't be? He's a young man. There's an opportunity there, and I think his output, his productivity, certainly the goal in Vancouver. He's involved in, I think Hanny's 4th tonight, the shot from the edge of the box. He's gotten himself into some terrific positions. Unfortunately, not quite always come up with the finishing touch, but he's enabled others, and he's been a huge piece of that puzzle. What I would say is that if you look at that attacking group, they all bring something very different to the table. You know, CJ's physical presence, Hanny's execution has been absolutely astounding. I think it's 19 goals now and 250 assists in this last season. But Randall's ability to, draw pressure, to break lines, to, connect with others. And now we add Jacob into that group as well, who offers some exceptional balance on the left-hand side. Something we needed, very much so.
One final question?
Sure. Yeah, Gary, we've talked a couple of times about how earlier you had said just getting into the playoffs would be a huge achievement. And, I mean, it's kind of funny how the narrative has flipped a little bit after just 3 games. But where do you stand on that now? How do you feel about where the team's headed, and what are you aiming for over this last stretch?
Well, we're in a positive mood. We're in a confident mood. You would expect that after 3 good wins. But I think the easiest mistake anyone can make is to feel as though because you go into the next game having scored 11, conceded 1, that the next challenge is going to be that much easier. It won't be. It'll be tougher. Every time that you win a game, I suspect the teams that we're playing, because that plays into it as well, those teams will look at our form and the ability that we've brought to the table in the last 2-3 weeks especially. We've always been a side that has been competitive. I think tipping the balance and seeing the goals that have started to flow. I think we've created those chances, I've said it before. But we're now starting to see the floodgates open a little bit, which is obviously good for the group. There are some huge challenges along the way here in these last 5 games, and some very, very important matchups. We have LA coming into town, who have drawn tonight, but I think 2 games in hand on us. But after a win tonight, we're obviously keen to chase down those teams above us. I think, do we go within a point or 2 of Dallas tonight on the same games? Well, then there's no reason why we shouldn't be looking up instead of down. But I want to be mindful of just what it takes to get above that line. Both conferences are incredibly tight again. It happens every year. And I'd love to think we can ride this wave and this momentum for as long as possible. But we've also got to be professional enough to earn results and maybe points at important times that will just be enough to tip the scales.